The Baker Gurvitz Army is making a little bit of a resurgence again, thanks to sites like YouTube where you can find their material. And of course, names like Adrian Gurvitz and Paul Gurvitz are not exactly household names, but Ginger Baker is. And Ginger Baker is the baker in the BGA, Baker Gurvitz Army. So we are lucky to live again in the internet era. I'm sure you've heard me say that once or twice before. But before the BGA, the Gurvitz brothers, Paul and Adrian, who was the mastermind, let's just say, and the guitar player, they had two other bands. They had Gun and Three Man Army, which were, I'm not gonna say just as good as the BGA, but they were definitely just as quirky and crazy and weird. Again, at the time, late 60s, early 70s, there was widespread true experimentation. People were doing things not in order to seem original, but because they wanted to do crazy and extravagant and special good stuff, right? You have Mogul Thrash, which also went unknown for a long period of time, and there were bands like that. Of course, some of them got lucky and became famous, and some fell on the byway. But now it's easier than ever to discover them and to listen to them. So if we start chronologically, the Gurvitz brothers founded first Gun, and that band came to some attention when Judas Priest released their remasters, if I'm not mistaken, late 90s, early 2000s. They released, I think, their entire catalog with a bunch of songs that were recorded for the sessions. And one of the songs that was suggested for the Stained Class sessions was Run from the Race with the Devil by Gun. In the end, they ended up doing Spooky Toots Better by You, Better Than Me, which today is a classic and fits that record very well. But at some point, Race with the Devil came out, and Race with the Devil is the opening track of Gun's first record, self-titled Gun. That's just the name of the record. And if you look at the album cover, it gives you a fairly good idea of what's on the record itself. That's how crazy it is. So it's a crazy cover and a crazy album. It's always difficult to describe music in words, but I think the best description that I can give is take early Genesis, Trespass era, and make the piano and orchestration sections a little bit more bombastic and a little bit more overtly, let's just say, front and center or overtly structured than they are in Genesis, right? In Genesis, it takes a long time until it builds up. Here, it's a little bit faster, and put on a drunken Peter Green fused with one of the more fiery guitarists of that time. So who was there? Early 70s, maybe. I wouldn't say Jeff Beck. I wouldn't really say Rory Gallagher, but infuse Peter Green with a little bit more speed and fire, and overt or apparent techno. But maybe I'm biased. Maybe it's just because Gurvitz kind of in his photos, he kind of looks a little bit, reminds of Peter Green. But I think it's a fairly accurate comparison. A very good guitar player, by the way. No slouch at all. And this was released in '68, and in '69 they released another sequel to it, which interestingly, the orchestration becomes even bigger and more prominent. So it's not so much the guitar that became more prominent. Some cool guitar work on both records. Race with the Devil is a wicked song, both guitar-wise and the vocals towards the end. There's kind of like an eerie laugh, like the devil is laughing when he's catching you. And he gives like this eerie, evil laugh, which is pretty cool and blends well with the record. and then Gun falls apart, and they start a new band, three-man army. They had something with Guns and Army. So the first record is Gun, the second is Gunsight, 68 and 69 respectively. And then they go on to found Three-Man Army, which is also very, very interesting band, continues in a similar vein, but for the most part they ditch the orchestration and the big keyboard. There's still a keyboard, but it's more like a Moog or a Mellotron, something like that. So it becomes much more aligned and much closer with I'm not gonna say mainstream rock, but rockier, definitely a much more guitar oriented sound. Still great compositions and good songs. And this band releases 3 records. The first one is Third of a Lifetime. That's the big one. That's the big record that the people who know Gun and Three-Man Army like. And then they record another album, which is a little bit more reminiscent of the Gun days, Mahesha. Kind of a weird record also. I mean, it's all the whole music is weird, but Mahesha is weird among the weirds. So it's kind of like more like a look back at the Gun days. A lot of that flavor, a lot of that kind of, not a lot, but some of that orchestration. And then as their third record, they release Three-Man Army #2. Go figure. But I don't know, maybe they thought of not releasing the first album. I don't know what the logic is behind it. But that's also a very, very good record. Definitely worth a spin or two, especially if you have access to YouTube. It's definitely worth playing a couple of times because it's a worthy record. And then their drummer, Tony Newman, leaves to join David Bowie. Oh, I'm sorry. They recorded a fourth record, which is entitled Three-Man Army 3, right? So the fourth record is 3, and then the third record is 2. And there's one record with a regular name, Mahesha, in between, and that is never released until the early 2000s. Again, from a purely guitar and playing and technical perspective, this is the best. This is on the highest professional level, but also it's the least kooky and weird of the records. So the most, what you would say, mainstream, or the most similar to a mainstream. And then Tony Newton goes on to join David Bowie, and of course the band kind of falls apart, and that's when Ginger Baker comes into the picture. So he's done with Cream or whatever they did afterwards, Blind Faith, if he was even involved. And then they start Baker Gurvitz Army, and they release 3 records, and these are the 3 records that most people know and love. This is the first one, and very often considered their best for good reasons. This is a very, very good record. It includes that long epic that is called Mad Jack, where they do all kind of crazy underlying music, and Ginger with this crazy drum beats. Ginger Baker kind of pretends to be Neil Peart here and there. And I think this song is kind of overrated, especially the lyrical part. It's like okay, it's a cute joke, but you keep telling it again and again and again. It's Ginger just not really singing. It's kind of talk singing, and it's conveying a funny story that doesn't make any sense. But it's funny for the first 5 seconds. Then afterwards, okay, we've heard it. Get to the point. But other than that, the music is phenomenal. It's just fantastic. They're all very good. Paul is a very, very capable bass player and a pretty good singer as well. Unfortunately, they did employ a full-time lead singer is not even pictured here, but he is listed. His name is Mr. Snips. Actually, no, I'm sorry. On the first record, they did all of the vocals themselves, and it was somebody else who did the vocals and the keyboards and the second vocals. So the main vocals were from Adrian and Paul probably. Then they do Elysian Encounters, another one, pretty similar to the first one. The sound is a little bit better, and they did hire a lead vocalist here, Mr. Snips, who, if I'm not mistaken, is not the same guy who did the vocals and the keyboards on the first one. Some very, very good music out here, and it's a little bit toned back, takes a little bit back that the aggression and borderline hard rock, heavy metal kind of guitar and assault that they do. All three together, the guitar and the drum and the bass, very, very good melodic bass, very very well complementing. So Baker works very, very well with the bass player. And then this is the last and final output by the Baker Gurvitz Army. It's, in my opinion, a very, very good record. And although all three of them are pretty close, I would put this on the top. Now, many people will tell you just the opposite, that this is the worst. And this is a criticism that we hear too often. It's like it's all over the place. They do all kind of things, which is precisely what I like, or at least one of the things that I like about it. It's not preset. It doesn't give you this curated feel, but just going in there and do what feels good at the moment. Again, I understand the argument against it, but very, very good guitar playing here. And actually, all of the instruments are very good. The sound is very good. It's polished. You can already hear that movement toward what today would typically describe as commercialism. Not necessarily so, but like a little bit almost over polished. But very good, very professional, very on time, very, very tight, very very good playing here. Of course, by Ginger and everybody else involved. Again, like you probably know by this time, I'm not a huge fan of vocalists. I think it was a mistake to hire a full-time vocalist. They could have handled themselves the vocals and just ditched most of them and make it instrumental. Makes the music itself more interesting. But it's good. It's fiery. It's rocky. It has some bluesy elements in there, and it doesn't lose that kind of fusion flair to it, especially due to Ginger, but not only. Flying In and Out of Stardom is a very good one. They're all pretty good. They're all pretty good. Thirsty for the Blues is good. So they have a few scorchers, and I would say that this kind of is my favorite record. It's definitely the outlier, in as much as you can say an outlier out of three, right? So these two kind of go hand in hand. They're relatively similar. I would give a slight edge to the first one, but I would say that this one is the best. And then the previous ones, Gun and Three Men Army, are definitely worth a spin. I wouldn't say you must run out and buy all of it right now, but it's good to have. It's good to have Three Men Army, the first one. It's good to have Three Men Army 2. And I don't know if the Three Men Army 3 is even available on physical copies. If it is, it's probably CD only. But be it as it may, it's very, very sad that Adrian Gurvitz and even Paul went nowhere. But Adrian definitely had a ton of potential. I mentioned to you that he's reminiscent of Peter Green, and of course many musicians were influenced by Greeny, but this guy had some closeness with Greeny's style, and like I said, like a more scorchy, a more fiery Greeny style. It's more like Peter Green on the end of the game, kind of that style of playing, fused with some other, maybe a little bit of Rory Gallagher. Rory Gallagher also had this kind of fire in him. Who else was in his times that I could compare it to him? Steve Howe, not so much, but he definitely had a little bit of that flavor, of that more Genesis kind of flavor. Not so much in the guitar, but generally in Gun. So that's in the long and the short of Baker Gurvitz Army and the two related bands. The Gurvitz brothers didn't achieve any kind of fame. Today they're pretty much anonymous, but they went on to be producers and session players, so they made it that way in the music industry. So they didn't become big household name musicians or rock stars, but they stayed in the industry. Adrian produced a lot of records and released some independent singles. Of course, he also went down that silly, slippery slope of becoming too commercial. He released two songs, two singles, if I'm not mistaken, under his own name or producing them for another band. And it's just so pitiful. Like, I could see from an engineer's perspective, an engineer producer, which was what he was doing, to get everything right and 100% on the spot and all of it and perfectly curated and engineered. But you get something too smooth, like, when there's this too much icing on the cake and it's too sweet and it's already, it's abrasive. And unfortunately for him, he released even one music video to go with it, and it's just so horrible, so cringe. You can kind of see him with that stupid expression that they used to have in the 80s, kind of staring into nowhere. And it kind of goes well with it, with two super cheesy, some song about love, or I should have looked it up who he was doing it for. So he did some stupid things like that, but at least he stayed in the music industry. And you don't hear him whine like many other would-be rock stars that, oh, this guy screwed me over and that guy screwed me over, and I didn't become a big famous rock star, and they owe it to me to be a rock star. So at least that. So at least they stayed in the industry and working with what they love. Unfortunately, not to the extent that we would like them to. As far as I know, he's still around. And I would very, very strongly recommend that everybody gives a spin to all of the releases. If not all of the releases, then at least two and third of a lifetime. Give it a spin and check out also the Gun and the other Three-Man Army records. So thanks for staying me so long. And in the meantime, rock on and on and on.